what I would probably ask is like, something good happened this session, something bad, because this is going to be the wrap-up show. Do you have anything? Did something bad happen to you out there in terms of policy, not in terms of anything personal? So there is something.
I'm not sure. Policy, if something bad happened.
Well, don't tell me yet. Just tell me if there was something. Was there a policy defeat that you were disappointed in? Think about that.
I'm thinking about it.
Was there something good that happened?
Well, I think that generally I would say. Yeah.
All right. On your side?
I'm sorry.
So, give me a little more. Something bad happened to you?
I don't know why you're phrasing this in terms of happening to me.
Personally, because everybody talks about you up there.
Sorry. There are two bills that I was
I've read the
involved
newspaper,
in.
okay?
There are two bills that I was involved in that I'm very pleased about.
Okay.
And then there's a couple of things that I'm very, very disappointed about.
Cool. All right, so this is going to be the wrap-up show.
Okay.
The session's over. And then we won't have another show till sometime in October.
Okay.
What,
Does that
like a
sound good?
campaign show?
Oh, because are you guys running? in
And
October?
Brian Keefe is running too. There's 3 candidates for 2 seats. So
Interesting.
you should have a campaign show.
So we
But
should
let's
have a
not talk
campaign
about
show.
the campaign at
No.
all. Let's just talk about the session.
Now, because we could do bad makeup and bad lighting on him. Is he running against you? We'll do the
It's
Nixon
the
Kennedy
best
thing.
2 out of 3. We're running against each other. It's the
Okay,
best
we're
2
not
out
really
of
going
3.
to do that. I'm just shooting my mouth out. All right, so who wants to lead off here?
You
Steve?
choose.
You're deep in thought.
I'm not deep in thought.
Are you glad the session's over? Long, tiring?
Yeah, it is, and partly I'm glad when the session's over because everything speeds up, and you don't have enough time to be really thoughtful. After you've vetted bills for weeks upon weeks and taken hours upon hours of testimony
Right.
and listening and trying to be really clear about your understanding of all the sides of an issue
Yeah.
in your committee, and then you pass it out of your committee. It goes to the floor for a vote, and we did really well from Human Services. I mean, almost everything passed with flying colors. I mean, and then it goes to the Senate, and then it comes back, and sometimes it's
Is this
not in the case of our particular bills,
right?
but it comes back almost unrecognizable. And you have no real time to do the vetting that you need to do. That's my main complaint. I find attached to that a lot of frustration personally, because I would like to see what it actually means and the details of it and so on.
Right.
And it's for example, marijuana. We'll talk about marijuana probably, but you didn't have a lot of time to deal with it from my perspective. It came out of the Senate, came over to us, and it just, you need much, much more time to do the really good, solid
So when
work.
it comes back over,
Yeah.
you have very little time, so you either have to accept it or table it.
No, you don't table it.
So you send it out, they mess with it, they send it back, they say deal with it. You have
Right.
very little time to deal with it. It's either going to be a yay or nay vote.
It goes to committee, and the committee has to try to figure out whether or not there's ample. It sounds like anything that was sent over there.
Can you take it back and try to fix it and put it back to its
Yeah,
original
You
way?
do.
Yeah, and
You
see,
do.
but you're leaving out some things, because sometimes it's like we do something, we send it to the Senate, and they change it and send it back. We can change it again and send it back, but they try to work out the disagreements, but sometimes you can't work it out, and then it goes to conference committee. And that's really spooky, because then like 6 people are deciding the shape of the bill, and then the House and the Senate just vote it up or down. So what Steve is describing
It's the
is the
first
fact that
part
you
of
have
the process.
two
Right.
chambers.
Right.
So there's all this strategic interaction, and at the end of the session, either you accept what they did or the bill dies. I mean, at the end of the session. So there's
right.
tremendous pressure, and you don't have time, and it's just craziness. But the one thing I want to add as a historical footnote is that, much to my regret, the House itself created the Senate. originally there was just the
Right.
House,
I think I
and then
remember you
they
mentioning
thought
that.
that they should
Right.
have a deliberative body, you know.
Right.
So they went out of their way to create the Senate, and as far as I'm concerned, it's never too late to correct your mistake, and let's just get rid of the Senate.
you
And
know-
then you
Yeah,
have to
yeah,
take
yeah,
responsibility for what the House does, and there's none of this playing the chambers
but
off
do-
again.
what
You know,
you wanna
these
do-
are complaints that I hear from Hollywood for screenwriters. They write their screenplay and they send it.
And then the
and
director messes it
and
up.
then they change it all so
Oh,
that
yeah.
it's so bad you don't
Yeah.
even want to have your name on it anymore.
And they don't.
So,
Yeah,
often,
sometimes they
often
take
it's
it out. Yeah.
unrecognizable.
so they could mess with your bill so much that you say, I
That's
don't
right.
want to have
Yeah,
any part of this
yeah.
anymore. I'm
We'll try again
pull
next
away."
time. Yeah.
Well,
Could
I
be.
have to say that we're very fortunate in our committee because we're dealing with a population of people that we spend a lot of time
Yeah.
on, and it's not the same as a lot of other committees. And so I think when we pass it out with a high number, tripartisan support,
Right.
and it goes to the House. And we have already been extremely thoughtful, and I think that the House generally, I think this year, Cynthia, I think everything just passed right through. that
For your committee.
From my committee.
Right, and
we
see,
had
different.
18 different.
That's right. You had a
bills.
lot
We
of
had
bills,
18
but
bills.
see, different committees has different reputations in terms
Yeah.
of the solidity of their work, and also different committees deal with different kinds of things. Like if you're a committee like Commerce or like Housing in general, you're
Right.
dealing with workplace
Yeah,
issues,
yeah.
and boy, it's going to be hard to get those
So you're butting
votes. It's
heads
going to
a
be
lot.
butting. So it can be very
Yeah.
different. Also, it's important to know that there's lots of stuff going on behind the scenes. The committee chair in the House is talking to the committee chair in the Senate. The speaker is talking to the president pro tem, and so they're trying to figure out how can we go about this. So there's a lot of sort of stage managing, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because remember, the idea is to try to pass something that makes things better for Vermonters.
Right.
You're never going to get everything you want, but can you do something that on balance makes a positive contribution? And I think everybody is working for that. It's just that we may have different views of, what's
Sure,
a
yeah.
positive
So why do they
contribution.
tend to leave your group alone?
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure. And that may not even be accurate. It may not be that anybody leaves us alone. Maybe it's just that when it comes down to these issues, we did have some challenges, I think, even within the committee when we looked at raising the age for smoking.
Right, right,
And
Yeah, I found that strange.
that becomes a big issue because
Right.
of the military.
right.
And how dare you, military, the service members are going to put themselves in harm's way, and they can't have a smoke. so it's like that. Yeah.
Did they say that about alcohol?
No, we didn't talk about alcohol. We focus on what's at hand, right in front of us. We don't talk about alcohol as related to marijuana, etc. We look at what is in front of us
Right.
in terms of specifics. But here, I do. We
Well,
do.
no, I mean, it's just like part of it is what bills are introduced or what the chair of the committee wants to do. I mean, what topics come before you.
Yeah, but he
Because-
said he was. I heard that in the context of cigarettes.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I'm
Right,
not.
because
So I'm
didn't
not
they
ta-
say that? Because I think they took away the right to drink in the military, right? Or
Not
or-
that's that
or is
that's
that
not
s-
current.
is that-
I don't know what's going on in the military. In Vermont, the drinking age is
Would you know?
21.
If I'm in the military, can I drink before 21?
Say I don't know.
I think that's a state by state regulation.
I thought
is a
they,
s- no.
right. I thought they took that away, but
I don't know.
they don't talk about it.
I don't know.
Oh, interesting. Anyways,
Well, we did talk about cigarettes, and
So-
we talked about cigarettes, and we had.
that was a good thing that happened for you, the cigarette thing, or a
Well,
bad
no,
thing?
I'm not putting any value on
Mm-hmm.
it. I'm just saying that we talked about that a lot. We had pediatricians come in, doctors come in,
Yeah.
talk about the effects. We had people from the cancer, the Lung
Yeah.
Association, and all those people talk about effects. We also find out how much that costs the state of Vermont
Right.
in terms of
Right.
medical problems. Medicaid expenses, probably $87 million or thereabouts per year in terms of
Wow.
the effect of smoking.
Right.
But when we talked to the military themselves and spoke to a general, I believe it was a general, and took testimony, they also see this as a problem, but they handle it on their own. In other words, if we will make sure that we adhere to the laws of the land. So if Vermont passes a smoking age of 21, then we will adhere to those laws, and we will regulate that as we will.
But see, this
So-
issue is a
Off
perfect.
base.
They know that it's not good.
Right.
The pediatricians say up to the age of 25, your brain is still forming,
Yeah.
that there are toxins in the smoke, that there are things that are harmful for you, not just in the short range, but in the long range. So the issue then gets all of these nuance. It has a lot of nuances to it.
Yeah.
21 years of age, why not 25 if the statistics prove that it's harmful up to age
Right.
25?
Right.
And so what we heard was there's a higher likelihood of a young person beginning up to the age of 21. After 21, the likelihood goes quite a bit down. So it's the seniors in high school that are helping the younger students to have their first cigarettes, etc. And so that was a real debate, but the issue hinged on the military, whether or not the military was going to be allowed to
Gonna have
smoke-
an exemption.
Have an exemption.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you carve out, so that goes to the Senate, it passed, it goes
Yeah.
over to the Senate, and the carve out was that the military would be able to continue.
But the
to-
bill did not pass ultimately. did
Well,
it?
it did, yeah.
It did.
So the bill in its present form says now, if you're in the military, you can smoke. If you're not, you can't.
Oh, no, you can smoke if you're in the military, regardless.
Well, I
but I
mean,
mean, if you're talking about
based on age.
And the age, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah you have to be 21.
How do you feel about that?
I feel it's the law of the land.
Yeah.
I feel that if you're paying $340 million per year, that's a guesstimate. But let's say if you took that, let's say that was so far off and crazy, and it's not $87 million in Medicaid. That's for smoking-related diseases, and maybe, maybe it's 34 million. But the figures we got was 340 million on tobacco-related illnesses in our state. If you're taking,
Really?
yes, per year. So
Wow.
if you're just taking that and saying, oh, let's go with 10%, that's $34 million.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't we try to do
Yeah.
our level best to
Yeah.
ensure the health of our citizens and to do the best we can so that less people will get hooked and there'll be less expenses for the state? And who bears the burden of those costs anyway? The taxpayers.
Right.
So let's just try to be more healthy, that's all.
Yeah. How'd you feel about it?
Well, I think that smoking is so destructive to people's health and people get addicted to nicotine. I don't think anybody should start smoking. I think that I just don't see a place for smoking in a healthy life.
Right.
And so anything that could prevent young people from using this substance, particularly in the smoking form, and getting addicted, I think that's a good thing. The problem is, as with many things, there's tensions in terms of, okay, you're ready to die for your country and you can't smoke. And we tried to address that. And
Yeah.
there's also the question of freedom of choice, even to do something that's destructive. And what we tried to do here is to try to say, okay, you're at that moment of being able to make those decisions at 21, not at 18. And that's what we've done with alcohol, too.
Right. Mhm.
So,
Right.
you always have this tension and this balance. And ironically, even though cigarette-related diseases cause so much loss in terms of health and productivity, we also get taxes from it. So then you have to think, okay, if fewer people are buying cigarettes, are we going to have less tax revenue? It's always complicated,
and here-
but
and
you
here you
always
go.
have to have a balance.
So here you go. So the revenue that's going to be lost in the third year, this is going to be a phase-in project, phase-in. So in the third year, it's projected that $900,000 is going to be lost in revenue from cigarette,
From less cigarettes. yeah.
selling less
Yeah.
cigarettes.
Yeah.
So $900,000
It's
will
not that much
It's not
compared
that-
to the
but-
healthcare costs.
Right.
That's it.
Interesting.
So you
Right.
have to
Right.
do a comparative study, and
Right.
you say, yeah, okay, but just keeping
That's
people
right.
off.
That's
and so ultimately, what you do is you probably raise the. I think we did to 2.1
Yeah.
cents per
Yeah.
pack. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't off the top of my head. They also discussed 13 cents a pack. I don't know. All I know is that the idea is that the health of our citizens is really
Yeah.
at stake here. and we want to make sure that we do our best job to
Right.
to ensure that.
Why, you bring up interesting, because you just reminded me, when I was reading about this, the only pushback that I read about, maybe I didn't read enough, was from business saying they were going to lose money. I didn't hear the military side at all discussed.
Because we did deal with it, we made the exemption, so that may have been part of it.
So that-
and
right.
and the businesses are going to lose sales. I mean, and that is a real consideration. But when I weighed it, I thought that protecting Vermonters was
Yeah.
more important. But that doesn't. I mean, I've worked for stores that sold cigarettes, and this is going to affect them. So you have to weigh these different kinds of things. So,
You do.
yeah.
Well, maybe you shouldn't sell cigarettes, because they're always going to be attacked. I mean, it's a product that you're selling that you know you're always going to be a problem with.
Well, the problem is that nicotine is just so addictive.
Yeah.
It's very, very addictive. But you see, if we can, I think that the statistics that you were just referring to show that if people don't start using it when they're young,
That's right.
they don't start
Yeah.
smoking.
Yeah.
And that may have to do with the development of our neurochemistry or something, or
Right.
we're not as susceptible. So if you can just keep people from starting
Yeah.
until they're 25, actually, or at least 21,
Yeah.
they're much less likely to start. And that would be just such a savings. I
That's right.
hardly know any people who smoke
Yeah.
who don't want to quit and haven't tried to quit. Why not just keep
right.
people from starting?
I know. I watched someone pay $8 and change a pack, and I went, "Oh my God, that's
No, really.
Yeah.
that was amazing."
a lot.
Yeah.
More on that? Are you good on that?
No, I just was looking here. You know,
Yeah.
we passed legislation to move e-cigarettes behind the counter.
Yeah, that was
or in
good,
locked
too.
containers too. Also, the 21-year.
I like
age.
the collaborative here was, and they actually they really brought up an interesting point on one of their shows. They were talking about vaping, but they were showing pictures about how some of these stores, and I don't want to believe it happens here in Vermont, so I'm going to say Vermont doesn't do it, but they're making the displays look so attractive to children, but they're really selling cigarettes.
That's why we put it behind the counter.
I found-
it's not candy.
I just found
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's
I just-
possible. It's possible that
You
the
know?
e-cigarettes could help some people wean themselves off cigarettes. I mean, we hear that story.
Took
That
a
is
lot
a
of
possibility.
testimony on that
Yeah.
too.
Yes,
We worked in that
but there's no
committee.
reason why they should be marketed out in front. You know,
No.
low down with flavors
Right.
and like candy or
Bubblegum,
anything like that.
no.
So.
Yeah, that was a human service
So,
committee.
so what do you got on your side?
Water.
of- Water. Is this a
Water.
Everywhere
positive or
today,
negative?
everywhere.
Water, it's a. I think it's a win, but it's a cautionary win.
We've begun serving Bennington water here. I want you to know that. So, because it's drinkable now.
Well, that's part of
you.
it.
Oh,
The key with water is that one of the bills that my committee worked on this session was an overhaul of all of the programs related to how do we fund drinking water and pollution control, like cleaning up sewer water and everything like that, for all the municipalities in the state. And this is federal money and state money that gets combined in funds, and towns can borrow it, or sometimes they can get a grant to build a new drinking water facility or to upgrade their sewer processing facility. And we know that without water, you have nothing.
Right.
Without clean water, and
Right.
North Bennington we found that without good water and without the ability to process sewer water, you don't have economic development, you don't have economic activity.
right.
So we rewrote all of these statutes and cleaned everything up and organized it. But the other thing that we did is we tried to do everything we could to make sure that these funds will continue to go to municipalities almost entirely, because one of the things that's happening with all of the clean water goals about cleaning up Lake Champlain and things like that is that certain kinds of private entities like a developer or a big agribusiness are starting to say, well, we need more money to do this cleanup work. So they're starting to look at these sources of funds that are
Yes.
supposed to be going not entirely to municipalities like trailer parks, low income situations.
Yeah.
So we put in the bill that the Agency of Natural Resources wanted to take out the word municipality everywhere it showed up, and we put it back in. And there's a study at the end about the needs that are coming down the pike in this area and what are the sources of funding. So it's not that this question of other entities taking some of the money is closed. And there might even be a situation where if a private developer processes his own water, it takes a burden off the town. So you could make an argument for it. But it's very, very important that we understand that the municipalities, if they can't provide clean water to drink, and if they can't process waste, if they have that kind of a setup,
Right.
you're not going to have any economic activity. So we preserved that for municipalities, and we cleaned up the language, and I'm very, very proud of that. Even though it was a housekeeping bill, we know that that is so important. And in fact, when North Bennington expands its drinking water plant in order to meet the demand from the people whose wells have been contaminated, they are probably going to be going to these funds for financing. And that's why it's really important that based on the work we did, the money will still be there for them.
Can towns also use these funds to just have their water tested for the first time?
That's a different, this is about capital investments,
Okay.
you know, where you are installing, you could be installing
Expanding
water
water,
purification on your drinking water, or some sort of, or drilling a new well, but it's not the routine testing. That would be in the operating budget. This is about capital investment. So building a new sewer plant.
Did you get any pushback on this from anybody?
Well, you know, we did. Actually, the agency wanted to take out municipal. They wanted to
now
allow.
why?
I think they wanted to allow other kinds of entities to get at this money, and I think it would be maybe big farms, because you know the farmers are having to do a lot of cleaning up, and I think they should. I understand how difficult it is, and I want them to find financing, but not this financing. You know, and I think big developers, you know, big parking lots or whatever they've got to clean up, I think they were starting to look at this money. So we tried to make sure that it was municipalities. We worked with the Vermont League of Cities and Towns on this to try to be sure the towns came first. So I'm really, really proud of that. The other thing that I worked on was...
Well, let me ask you a question. Can this be one of those things that's starved to death due to lack of funding?
It's, do you mean that the municipalities wouldn't be able to get any loans?
Well, the money comes.
The money comes from the federal government.
From the federal
government. The federal government, under the EPA, makes this money available to all states.
everybody.
Because
Okay.
this is a key infrastructure for economic development. And so they make the money available to states on a prorated basis and everything. So the federal government makes the money available. The state has to match it. Okay, so the state has to appropriate its own money, which we do in my committee, and match it, and then the towns apply for it. So there's a whole process. Now, if the state did not put up the matching money, we would not be able to use the federal money. Towns have to put up their own money too. A lot of times towns will issue a bond. You know, they'll issue a bond in order to do it.
Right.
But the key thing is that it'll end up being a combination of federal, state, and local money. And so you can do more than if you just had local money. And so so I don't think there's any chance that this is going to dry up. This is so important.
Yeah.
It's always been, you know, it's been happening for years. But how it's done, the timing of it, who's eligible, will really make a difference in terms of who gets it in the future. And they always have a list of projects, and it's like the money never covers everybody
I was
that
wondering about
qualifies.
that too.
They
So-
rank it in terms of
Right.
you know, the kind of project it is, how many people it covers, the income level of the community, you know, a whole bunch of things, and the money just goes down so far, and then those people sort of probably move to the top next year. So it's something that happens all the time. It's one of those invisible things that people don't think about until their town is applying for a
Now,
grant.
it's an equal thing. It's not like Burlington always gets it because they're the biggest
No.
and they're in the need
No.
the most.
No.
So
They-
everybody has an equal chance.
Well,
I don't know about
They
equal.
are-
Remember, there are some towns that don't have either.
Anything.
They don't have water. They don't have any kind of water infrastructure, and so you know people have their own wells and they have their own septic systems, and that's a whole
Right.
different kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But for any kind of municipality that does have those facilities, Manchester does, Arlington does, Sunderland, to my knowledge, does not. Although some people in Sunderland may have Arlington.
And
company
just another
water.
stupid question. So
Sandgate has neither of those things. So
nothing.
Sandgate is not going to get this money.
Sandgate doesn't have
Yeah.
anything. It has one remaining schoolhouse. So a town like Bennington that finds they have a pollution problem in their water, do they get jumped to the top of the list?
I think that it
or
would
do they have
depend.
to wait their
One of them.
turn?
They might have emergency funds too. You know, if you have an emergency health and safety thing, I think there's a special cleanup fund that they've been drawing on
That's
to
where
do
they
some
would
of the
do that.
work.
Okay.
But in terms of like the major expansion, the North Bennington thing might move to the top of the list because of the urgency.
Okay.
But that's inside the A&R. They have all
Yeah.
ranking point
Okay.
system and everything like that.
Okay.
So I was really, really happy about that, and I think that, you know, until you have a problem with your water or your septic system or your sewer
Yeah.
system, you take it for granted,
Yeah.
and we can't. We have to keep upgrading these things. Then the other thing I just want to mention is that in the capital bill, which was in my committee, we put some money towards extending telecommunications coverage, improving high-speed internet for unserved and underserved communities, and we all know of some of those. And $300,000 is not a lot, but it's something. There is a program ongoing to try to do this for communities. The communities like Sandgate, now you have some coverage, but it isn't really as good as it needs to be.
Right.
And the same for Rupert and probably corners of Dorset and Manchester as well. So this is a small amount of money, but the Department of Public Service does have an ongoing program about this, and I think it's very important if anybody is watching this program and you feel that you don't have access to good enough service. Not that you're not willing to pay for it, because of course you could be able to get more, but you just don't want to pay for it, but that you literally can't get
Yeah.
what you need to run a business from your home or for your kids to do homework from home. That's the kind of thing that we want. Then you need to contact the Department of Public Service, and they have a program, and I have the contact information, and people can contact me, but it's very important that people understand that there may be possibility of getting small grants to do upgrades of service, even working with existing carrier. An existing carrier could get a grant to upgrade the service. And again, this is about economic development, and it's also about education, because of this question of that there are some kids in some parts of the state, they stay after school to do their homework on Google Docs because that's where their homework is.
Now, when you say to expand, you're not necessarily saying to improve,
No.
but rather to stretch the lines out so people in distant neighborhoods can finally get.
If there are people who
3
don't
megabytes per
have it,
second.
if there are people who don't have it,
Yeah, that's the word.
you want to be extending it to there. If there are people who have it, but it isn't good enough to do what we now need to do, because one of the things is that what might have been sufficient 10 years ago is
Right.
no longer sufficient. So we want everybody to get up to a good current standard. So it's both extending to people who have no possibility of service, or upgrading for people who have service, but it isn't good enough to run a business from your home.
Well, Fairpoint's going to say that's not going to happen in Sandgate. I mean, they said 3
not
megabytes.
necessarily.
and
Not
they-
necessarily.
I was talking to one of the techs on the line. He said he tested my line. He said, best you're ever going to get using this method is 8 megabytes per second.
Yes, but maybe we have to upgrade the method.
Right. Now, I'd take it 8 megabytes, don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, because I'm at 3.
Yeah.
But are you saying that these grants would be available to up a town like Sandgate to maybe 5 megabytes? on the line?
I'm not familiar with the megabyte standard that you're using. What I have in my mind, and I don't even have that material, is like 100 up, 100 down, and I don't know if that's what
that's
we're talking
here.
about.
That's in
Yeah,
cities. That's city
yeah.
folks.
Yeah,
that's the
that is
Clampetts.
that is what the federal government says you need to have.
Yeah, so we can't even get that
Right,
based on the
exactly.
method being used right now
Exactly.
in Sandgate.
So then you need to look
So
into
welcome to
changes in the method.
1978.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's dialogue.
yeah.
Sometimes I just make that
When
sound.
cable came to town, you see, what you had to do was, the only reason why you got cable was because you didn't have access. And the airwaves are owned by the people. Say, the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, indicated that that everyone
Right.
has a right to receive, for the security and safety
Yeah.
of their individual lives, information that can be brought to them, and that is their right. That was spelled out very clearly in the articles in the Federal Communications Act. Now, that was with cable television, and then cable came to town, and what they did was they went into a select board, and council members and so on, and they started saying, if you let my company come into your district, then we can assure you that once we're up and running, that we will be very happy to, let's just say, we would like to have your vote. And so they voted. And so that's how there got to be so much money. But once they got the contracts, that is, the cable companies got the contracts, because the council members voted for that particular company.
I don't know
to
what
come
you're
into town.
talking about.
Well, I'll tell you what.
Arlington Select Board never voted on anything like that.
All I'm telling you is that this is the way the Federal Communications issue went. It was a problem then. It remains to be a problem once a telecommunications company comes in and they promise you that everyone who does not have access will now get access, and they come in and they say, no, we will focus our attention on the dense population, and the most rural population is the lowest on the
Yeah, but you
totem
see,
pole.
you're, they never made those promises. They don't have to
They-
anymore. The Telecommunications Act of 1998 said they didn't have to. The state of Vermont cannot regulate the cable companies at all. They can regulate phone companies, but they can't regulate cable.
Yeah.
And
so,
besides,
so
that's
they
the way
basically,
it is.
so
No,
basically they can say,
Yeah,
we
that's-
won't ever
that's the way
come.
it is.
So the $300,000.
We have to fill in the
So the
gaps.
$300,000.
We have to fill in the
The
gaps.
$300,000 that you gave, basically, they can. It's not going to go to Rupert. It's not going to go to Sandgate.
it's going to
because-
go somewhere that doesn't have coverage. And that's what we need to do. The governors of the state of Vermont have promised since 2006, 2007, that everybody's going to have good service, and they don't because of exactly the cherry picking and the misbehavior of the big companies. That's the way it is. I said back in 2007, put a fee on any company that doesn't cover everybody in a town, and then use the fee to extend coverage. They wouldn't do it. So
Who's
they? The legislature. I had a bill. I had an amendment, and they wouldn't do it. So they have allowed, this is, the legislature and the governor have allowed the big corporations to do exactly what you said. And in lieu of the kind of approach that I said, we have to figure out some money to try to get companies like EC Fiber, which is a municipal-based way of extending coverage, or municipal groups getting together and upgrading the service in ways that will work. We have to do that, because if we wait for the federal government to change those laws, or even the state government to change it, they're not going to do it. So certainly the $300,000 is not enough, but it's better than nothing. And it who knows where it's going to go. I didn't get that money saying, oh, it's going to go to Sandgate. If people in Sandgate want better coverage and they get together and they go to the DPS and figure out a way to get better coverage, other communities in the state have been doing that. It's not impossible. And that's what we need to do. And we need to force the state to help the communities get what their right is, because they're
their
not right now.
It's 2% of Sandgate is
Is not
2%.
wired right now.
2% is.
Is.
Only 2%.
Only 2% of Sandgate?
Yeah, 2%.
No
So
wonder
it's
they
really-
can't watch anything. Oh.
Yeah.
Because I'll keep saying to them, go watch a
Yeah,
show or on
2%.
something, and
But you
they'll
see,
go,
we
we
had
can't
this
see
whole
it.
But
discussion.
Rupert's not doing much better.
Right.
Maybe they get.
No, I mean,
maybe
and
they
the
got,
other thing, the other
9%.
big problem here is this.
Sandgate, only 2% of Sandgate
Yeah.
is
Yeah, but I don't
wired
know. Are
with
you talking
cheap
about
broadband?
geography or
No, I'm
population?
talking about population.
Okay.
I'm talking about
Wow.
population.
But do
I
you
thought it was
meet the
better.
standard or have any kind of coverage?
Have the type of coverage that's going to
Right.
allow them to
Okay,
have access.
so he means have really good coverage, not
Well-
have some kind of coverage.
Well, really good coverage is 3 megabytes per second. That was what they guaranteed on those meetings. They
Okay.
said if you're a certain distance from the box, and
Right,
my
right,
box
right.
is at by Town Hall,
Right.
you can make it. So everybody
Yeah.
was driving, watching
Right.
their odometers
Right,
to
right.
see if they'd make it.
Right.
So once everybody did that, only 2% ended up being covered. Wow, so no wonder everybody's pissed
Yeah,
off.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
And see,
I didn't
why
know.
can't we? Now, one of the things EC Fiber has been doing in other areas, they've been working with Fairpoint, where they use Fairpoint's poles,
Yeah,
and EC
yeah.
Fiber strings the fiber. What if you could take fiber, not cable, not telephone wire,
yeah.
fiber all the way into Sandgate?
Right.
Then at the end of the road, everybody has fiber connections, the best connection. If a storm blows it down, you put it back up. If you want cell phone reception at your house, you can then get a box and antenna and get it through the internet.
Yeah.
If the internet coverage is good enough, you can get cell phone service at your house through it. So let's see what we can do. Everything Steve said about the screwy way
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
has unfolded in terms of the influence of the telecommunications company is true, but that's the way it is, and I'm not going to give up in trying to. I mean, this is like rural electrification to
It
me.
really is. It
and
really is.
so
Yeah.
the problem is, for the past 7 years or 8 years, most of the money has gone to improve the coverage in areas that already have good coverage instead of for the poor areas.
Was I reading
the
that
areas
was what
with poor
VTEL is
coverage.
being accused of?
VTEL is
VTEL,
doing the
oh my goodness.
wireless. The problem is
Right.
the federal government gave them this money. The
Yes.
state did not want to do this,
Right.
and they're doing this internet over wireless. And I'm sorry, I just don't think with our geography and our weather,
Yeah, I
don't
tried
think
it.
that's going to be reliable.
I tried. I
you
forget.
did
I not VTEL's, but another company.
and
so
satellite.
Satellites. I
VTEL
had-
is different, but I'm not sure it would even reach you because it's out by the Nolan's farm.
Right. My idea is
It
they
wouldn't
have
reach
they
you.
have to, it's not it's almost based on cell tower concept, right?
yeah.
So you got to put
Yeah.
these you got to walk these
You
towers.
can't have
towards
enough
people.
towers,
Right.
to cover Sandgate. How can you have enough towers to cover?
You
You need
know.
fiber. You need fiber to the end of the
Right.
road. That's what you need.
No one is going to want to string it.
But you see, that's
No.
where I think EC Fiber has done this in other communities. And if EC Fiber
Hmm.
and Fairpoint can work together, Fairpoint can make some money, and EC Fiber has been doing it with financing and earning money. You're going to have to pay for this.
So-
It's not going to be free.
One last
but
question.
It has worked in other communities, and I think it should work.
So I don't know
in
if you can answer this. You probably can't, but I'll throw it out. So if this guy says that your lines, the best you're ever going to get is like 8, and I'm at 3, the question I wanted to ask was, so why can't we go to 5?
Well, could you upgrade the box? Now, see, I have
I guess that's the-
technological
I guess that's the
limitations,
question.
but you're saying you were talking about the distance from the box, and I've heard of this, the T1 box or whatever before. So what if you could give Fairpoint a grant so that they could upgrade all those boxes
get everybody
to
at
get
least up to
better?
5 to 6,
I have like
yeah.
real technological limits, but see, that's what we want to be thinking about. Given the constraints that we have, the technological systems that we have, what can we do to make it work
Right.
better?
I guess that's kind of what I'm
Yeah.
getting at. I
There's
mean,
there's
we
another
can't
issue.
get to that point where we
There's-
get what we need.
There's another issue, and that is the real estate.
Yes.
You can't sell your house.
People don't want to move in.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
So
Right.
Yeah.
It's economic development.
You have this garden spot
Right.
in Sandgate. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's a beautiful place, a lovely place. And if you want to be an entrepreneur, or you are an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
and you want to do work from home, you can't live in Sandgate.
Right.
Right.
And there, how many rural communities
It's true, all over the state.
all over Vermont,
All
Yeah.
over the
the
state.
same exact issue, and that is where we're economically disadvantaged. Because if you had $30 million that you're putting into this project,
Yeah.
$30 million, not 300,000, then you begin to solve that problem and the problem with people coming into the state, wanting to buy into the state, being in the state because you can do everything remotely.
You know, I totally agree with that. I've been trying to do this for 7 years. The problem is the administration and the legislature is so influenced by the large corporations that they don't want a source of funding. One thing we tried to do is to put another charge on the universal service fee. Now that's on telephone service, so it would have made that.
I saw
to
that.
use it to extend this, and we could not do this. I originally tried for $1 million. Not enough. I couldn't get $1 million through the Senate.
Yeah.
The Senate did $750,000, and then the House lowered it to $300,000. So if anybody wants to know why it's $300,000 instead of $1 million, ask
Yeah.
the House leadership, because it was $1 million that I asked for, and $750,000, and then $300,000. It was $1 million going out of the
let
House.
me ask you-
So,
but this-
but
let me ask
the
a
fact that
follow-up.
we can't do everything doesn't relieve us of the responsibility to try to do something.
But I'm curious, like, do you see a point where we're actually do we need another Great Recession to get money again to do the next big leap?
No,
in
you're
the
not going to
state?
get it. The federal government is not going to be able to do that. What we have to do is we have to see that there's a real bifurcation in Vermont. There are certain parts of the state that are growing well and that have low unemployment rates, and then large parts of the state, I would say the Northeast Kingdom, Rutland, and the Bennington area, that are not. And if you look at the different unemployment rates, they're very, very
Yeah,
different.
yeah.
And one of the factors is telecommunications, the ability to run a business, the ability to have people come to your inn if you don't have good service, the ability to sell your house, good education.
let me ask you this.
So wait, let me finish.
Yep, finish that.
This rural economic development, I've been in a working group about
Yeah.
that for 4 years.
I've heard you
This is
before on this.
really,
Yep.
really important.
Yeah.
Now, we have agreement that it's important. People agree that it's important. They just haven't been able to put enough money into it. So one of the things
Right,
that I think
right.
people out there need to ask of any candidate that comes to talk to you
Yeah.
What are you going to do about this? And it matters even if somebody lives in, say, the center of Arlington or Manchester and they have good service, because if their neighbors don't have good service, it puts a burden on them in terms of the lack of economic activity and the tax burden and everything.
Now, hold on,
Everybody
you're running
benefits.
out of time, but let me ask this quick question. So, okay, so obviously
Running out of time, how could that be?
we're not going to get money from the government. We're only can manage to get 300,000. We know,
year,
wait,
future.
right? But we know we need a lot more. So I guess the question I have for you both is, and answer this fast because you only got 15 minutes before we go to something else. 2 minutes is: do you think Vermonters are willing to pay for the type of broadband that this state really needs to take care of business, or do you think this state is too old to feel that it's important?
It has
Even older people use the internet.
Yeah.
And the older people understand the value of it when they're Skyping to their family members across the country or wherever. And everyone can use it and needs it. It's a 21st century technology
Even in
until we
terms
get
of,
something else.
doctor's
And
visits.
it is
Right.
really, really
Yeah.
necessary.
Do you think
it should
they pay
be
for
top.
it?
They're going to have to pay for it because it has to become top on the priority list
Yeah, and
of
what do you
we
think
do.
it would cost? Like when you
Wait,
look at these numbers.
No, we don't know how much it's going to cost. It's all estimates. But I want to go back to my idea from before. If there's a company, for instance, a
Yes,
cable company, and they cover the center of a town and they don't cover the outlying
Yeah,
areas,
yeah.
my idea is you put a fee on them,
Yeah, yeah.
and you use that money to make grants to fund the extension. So if there's a company that covers everybody in the town, they're not cherry picking, they're covering the hollows, they don't pay that fee. If they do the cherry picking, they don't cover the rural, they pay the fee, and then some other company can do the extension, get the grant, and do it.
And
in
I get
that
that, but
way,
I-
the companies would
but
be financing
It sounds like
it.
I'm just going to be paying the fee.
It depends, because it
Yes.
depends on the behavior of the company. They can take it
I
out of their
mean,
profits.
It seems to me like it needs to be a statewide
It could be both.
money-raising
It could be
event
both.
that we all agree as a state. If we need to put
I think
this
it has
money
to
in.
be both. It has to be both. It has to be
All
a
right,
combination.
We know
of,
that left to the corporations,
they won't do
Right,
it.
they will
won't do
not do it. We know that the corporations will take whatever profit they can,
Yeah.
and that is the bottom line. And that's why they go to places that are densely populated.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that they're going to make money. And that's why you have, if you have cable, that you have a basic tier, and then all these add-ons, and the next thing you know, it's not $80 that you're paying,
Yeah.
it's $200 a month.
Yeah.
And they're raking the money in. But see, cable is dying right now. There are other options that are coming in, and so in the next 5 to 10 years, this conversation will be interested to review, because by that time there is going to be opportunities for telecommunications to do things that have not yet, we haven't
Yeah.
approached yet, I think.
Yeah.
I think if you look at the trajectory of where we're going, and the state knows it, the state knows that we are being held back right now because we do not have any economic advantage when you do not have
got
the
nothing.
telecommunication
Yeah.
system in
Right.
place.
Yeah.
And
And it's the
VTEL,
state's fault.
and VTEL
It's the
isn't
state's fault.
VTEL isn't doing it,
Right.
and
They can't do
Comcast
it.
isn't doing
The
it.
technology
and-
doesn't work.
and
But
so-
I just want to point out that the successive governors have promised this,
Yeah.
and they have not fulfilled that promise. And so I think we have every right to ask them to step up. Every candidate you see this coming election season, people should ask them, what is your plan to extend
Yeah.
the internet? Even if they already have it, because they will benefit if everybody else is connected too.
That's
Yeah,
true.
I agree.
And it's a necessity. It is not a luxury.
and-
This is
and-
a necessity now.
And I can see, I can see people need. That's the way they're going to start connecting with the doctors a lot. Instead of trying to find a card to get them into town, they're going to be connecting online. So I see everything
Yeah.
we're going towards.
Yeah.
All right, you've only got 14 minutes. So, what else you want to put on the table before the end of this legislative session?
What do I want to put on? the
Yeah.
table?
What's the last thing? You got one more thing. You can only have 7 minutes.
Well,
Steve.
well-
or 10. You just keep talking until she stops you.
It's about 30 seconds in.
What?
I believe I let you talk quite a bit about tobacco.
You did good. I'll give you credit. What's the last thing you want to say before I don't see you for months?
Well, I think
What
that
hap-
this
what
was,
else happened on
Well,
this
I just think that There were very few distractions this year, like last year. I thought that we did really good work in the legislature.
Yeah.
I was happy to be there. And
The dental thing went through.
dental therapists went through. And
And can I ask you a question about
sure,
that? 'Cause,
yeah.
Can they have an office all by themselves, or do
No,
they need to
cannot.
attach
no,
to a dentist
No, they have to
in case
have,
of
yeah,
emergency?
they have to
or-
have supervisor.
Okay.
They have to be under the jurisdiction.
But the dentist
of-
doesn't actually have to be there. They can be under the supervision of the dentist, and I don't believe the dentist has to be physically present.
And this is
That's
just
correct.
a silly
And
question.
it's voluntary. The dentist doesn't
Yeah.
have to do this.
Exactly right.
So there are some dentists that are very expensive to go to. So
Mm-hmm.
can the dentist charge whatever he feels like it, even if it's very close to the fees that he normally charges, or
Well,
is there any kind of
the-
control about?
The issue here largely was underserved populations,
Right. Right.
rural populations who did not have proper dental care.
Exactly.
And so what happens is that those people end up going into the emergency room
Right.
For dental
for
problems.
dental problems, and it's really, really expensive.
Yeah.
And it's for the state of Vermont. The dental therapist, it is you need 2 years of training.
Yeah.
And Vermont Tech is in the position to have the 2-year program.
But I guess what's the guarantee that they have to do
They
this?
have 30.
They don't have to do it.
Oh no, dentists all over the state
Yeah.
can say we don't want to have it, but there are already numerous dentists
that are
have
interested
stepped
in
up
it.
to the
Okay.
plate and said we would like to have a dental therapist. A dental therapist does everything that a dental
Right,
hygienist
okay.
does,
Right.
and has 34 specific things that they do that are not that are specific to
Yeah.
the work they do.
It-
The dentists
And-
do.
and
It's
I'm
like a
not-
physician's assistant versus
well,
a
I know
nurse
that, but
and a
I'm,
doctor. Yeah.
I'm not trying to see the dark side in people. I'm just saying, okay, so now I have a dental therapist helping me. I can pay her less money because she's a dental therapist.
Mm-hmm.
But where's the guarantee that that dentist is actually going to take any more Medicaid poor people patients? He can just say, I don't want to do it anyways. I mean, so
It'll be
where's the
more- it'll
guarantee
be-
that they have to
it
help
will
poor
be-
people?
It'll be more difficult to do that. Because
How? Can
because
poor people complain?
well, no, because there are dentists who really have a heart and a
And I-
concern
and I believe that.
for those
And it
who are
creates more
underserved.
capacity. I mean, I believe they will be charging less for those services, just like they charge less for a dental hygienist if see the dentist. But I think you'll have more capacity to provide dental care, and that has to be a good thing, even if it's still
Because the idea is he's going to pay this person less money to be called a dental therapist, and then because he has to pay them less money, he can turn around and then accept less money from Medicare to fill that cavity. Is this the correct way I see this money flowing?
I don't know about that. I don't
I mean, what
know
was
how
the whole idea was to help these underserved populations.
Yep.
And dentists, I'm sure, were like a lot
There's
of
set
doctors out
charges
here.
in Medicaid of what you can get
Right,
reimbursed.
and I know that because every
And
time
that
I
will
go
be
to my
true.
dentist,
Yeah.
I mean, my insurance never covers the plan. He's always charging much more, and I
Yeah.
have to pay the difference. So
Yeah.
I get that. It's
Yeah.
it's a joke. We all know what's going on. But so the dental therapists, great, they're there now. But where's the guarantee that they have to pay any more attention to people in need than they did before?
I don't think there is a guarantee, but I do know that there are many practices who are interested in doing this specifically in order to extend access to care in areas of the state that don't have it now.
Okay, and
But
believe
there-
me, I'm
but
hoping for the
I
best.
know, but I don't think there's any. I don't think there are. I mean, you were in the committee that was doing this, but I don't recall any kinds of regulations and restrictions on this. But there may be. There are a lot of rules about doctors and dentists, in terms of how they practice and their license and what they charge that are not. I don't have immediate access to. But I think.
and
But I think
hope,
you have.
I hope it's. Believe me,
I
I
think
want to
that- I
believe
think
that.
that's an issue.
What we did was we vetted the 34 things that they will be allowed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And those are also things that dentists can do, but dental hygienists cannot do.
Right.
That's why you get 2 years of training.
Yeah.
And then you have
Yeah.
to be under the supervision of the dentist
Right.
and so on. But a dentist has 200 different procedures that they can do.
Yeah.
So these 34 are the ones that pop up most of the time.
Like filling cavities, probably.
Well, yeah, and or
exactly.
cleaning someone's
Cleaning,
teeth like a
right.
hygienist would do,
Yeah.
or if a tooth needs to be pulled or something
I get
like
all
that.
that,
So I
believe
mean,
me,
so
I
what
understand
happens
that.
is you're just extending to
Right.
places that are not currently served this opportunity
Yeah.
because it. You know that if you let your teeth go, then the
Yeah.
likelihood of other serious illnesses.
It has health implications.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
huge, and
You were judged by your teeth.
in the Medicaid population,
Yeah.
it just leads to a lot more terrible things happening to you.
Now, I'm not trying to knock this program. I'm glad it's there because it seems to be easier to have a dentist have an employee that's higher trained than it is to get two dentists to have a practice together.
That's the point.
So-
you want
so-
to multiply.
so it's great.
You know,
It's great.
But it isn't foolproof or fail-safe.
Right, and
I mean,
I
I
just-
think you brought up a good point.
I
you
just
know,
want to see,
We'll have to see how
you
it
know,
goes.
like,
Yeah.
I don't want to see people being still refused because we set up this great thing and they're still going, we're still not getting paid enough. Still not going to take care of poor people. Piss off. So that's my concern. But wait, you're almost out of time.
There are going to be enough.
I think
I
there are
hope so.
clinics that
enough
are
men-
already
I want
wanting to
to.
do that.
There are
I
enough
wanna
men
believe
and
this,
women
Stan.
in the state of Vermont
Yeah.
who really care, and they're not going to let that happen. I mean, some people, they're too busy and so on,
Yeah.
and they do take Medicaid
Yeah.
patients now, but they have to cap it at a certain place. This will allow for more
So
flexibility to
once
reach more
once a
people.
dental therapist gets, just going in the future, 20
Yeah.
years from now, 10 years from now. So I've been a dental therapist now for 10 years. You know, I've got it together. So do you think there'll be a time when you can go to school and finish and become a dentist, or you can just stay a dental therapist because, you know, it's a good business and you've got your own office. And do you think they'll ever be allowed to be free?
I'm not sure. I
This
would
is-
say
this
at
is a
this
pilot
at this
program.
stage,
It's
at
a-
this stage,
we
no.
have-
No.
No, I
But
mean, we
maybe
have
in the
to see how
future.
this works.
Yeah.
And then before we do any other changes.
Yeah. I get you.
I think so.
Okay.
One more
you got the
thing.
last thing.
Okay,
You got,
the-
and look, you only got 5 minutes.
Okay, I'll be quick. The one thing that I consider a loss or something that did not happen that I wish had happened had to do with the Act 46, the Education Consolidation Bill. And one of the things I really wanted to do this session was to try to loosen up some of the rules about the consolidation because I don't really think they make a lot of sense in our area. And I was unable to get anything loosened up. The current approach is, well, let's see what people come up with these mergers and maybe we'll loosen it in the future if it works. But the message that I would want to get out to people is that I think that school districts that can find good combinations and mergers that make sense to them for educational and financial reasons, for what's best for their students, and if it fits the Act 46 criteria, that's fine, go for it.
Yeah.
But if they can come up with a good combination that makes sense to them for all those reasons, and it doesn't fit those criteria, then they should still try to do it. They should ask for a waiver. Because the last thing our school district should be doing is to be merging with districts that are 40 miles away or that they have nothing in common with, simply to meet Act 46 to get a tax break or to meet this deadline. That this is a permanent change. It's going to be really hard to undo it. So I think people should come up with governance structures that make sense to them within the context of what they're trying to do for their communities and their neighboring communities, and then if it doesn't fit, ask for a waiver. And that's a risky thing because we don't know how the State Board of Education is going to handle that, but I really think that for communities to do something just to meet relatively arbitrary criteria like 1,100 students or 900, that doesn't make sense. So I would
agree,
really
yeah.
want to say that, and I think there's a chance that in the future we might be able to loosen some of the requirements, but I failed. I worked with a lot of the other people up there who wanted to loosen them, and we failed to do that. And you were concerned about the school choice issue and everything. We failed to make any progress there.
You
So
both have
I'm
a
sorry
deadline,
about that.
right? Because
Pardon?
is it 2017?
Yeah, I think
it
it's
gets
20
locked in cement
Well,
for
you're
years.
supposed to propose what your governance structure is going to be by that time. And if you don't meet their criteria, then they even have the power to force you to do things, which I think is totally wrong and undemocratic. And I was not able to undo that either.
And so any work that you want to do in changing this, it has to happen before that day. Because will you have any power after that day?
You don't have any power now.
That's a good point.
because of Act 46, and I
That's
voted
true.
against it. So, you know.
But you lose even more power, won't you?
You still always have the power
right now
to
you
sue
can
the
put
state.
up a fight, right?
You always have the power to sue the state, and that's where I think some of these towns will be going, because I think that the state may not grant the waivers, and I think some towns are just going to say, we're not going to do this. But we'll have to see.
A lot of towns have already said that they like the idea too.
That's right,
So-
and they should do
you
it.
know, and-
They
and-
absolutely should
and-
do it.
And so it's not just, everyone is bemoaning the fact that there's Act
There's a bunch that are
46.
working well.
And the reality is that you know, Act 46, which I voted for, although I was given assurances that we could continue with school choice, is that we were paying and are paying too much for property taxes.
Right.
Yes, but this
And-
is not going to save a lot of money,
However,
and we need to do
wait,
tax
how-
reform.
however,
I
okay.
can lower
How-
property
how-
taxes by 20
okay,
cents.
Okay, but that's not,
Act 46 is not going to save money.
all right. Did the property taxes go up this year?
No, because everybody used their reserves and surpluses, and state used
Okay,
20 million in
okay,
surplus. So what's
but-
going to happen next year? And that is, any changes in cost was not from Act 46. It hasn't even gone into effect.
Is it going to save some money? Act 46, you say no? It's not-
Eventually,
It's
maybe.
not going to save any money.
Eventually, maybe in the long
The
run.
reason why it went through in part was to put a cap on spending in local municipalities and in the different districts. And that is what happened. I mean, there
Yeah,
are
but
now...
that's a temporary cap.
Okay.
We've
but
always
there-
had the excess spending threshold.
Yeah, and that was changed a bit too. But the reality is, we were asked, or people were asked, to put limits on how much they spend. And that...
I don't have a problem with that. It's the
well,
consolidation
that's
part.
part of 46.
And I voted for the change this year, the adjustment in caps. I
Okay,
voted
well,
for
that,
those caps.
well, so, because you can't have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah, we didn't have to do the forced consolidation. We could have made it voluntary. And that's
And-
completely separate from the caps.
It
on,
is.
On that point,
Yeah.
we got to leave that one. So just remember what you just said, and we're going to pick it up 4 months from now. We'll just sit down here and just continue like nothing's changed.
Yeah.
You may look a little different. You may have lost an arm by then, but we'll just keep going like that. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. Thank you all for being here, and we'll see you. Is it October?
I don't know.
When does the legislative start up?
No, it doesn't start till January. We have to do the election.
Oh, that's right. You got to get it back in your office, in your
Yeah.
jobs again.
Yeah.
All right. So maybe they're not going to be here next time. Anyways, thank you all for watching. Thank you, brother.
You don't even know what we're doing.
I have no
January
idea.
to May. God.
You guys go up there and you drink. I know what you do up there. It's just
Boy, do
out of
we-
control.
That is like so not the case.
You guys smoke
We're
cigarettes and
practically-
drink.
Also
He's
like
like
the
a
most-
monk and I'm like a nun. I mean,
like
you know,
the
it's
most
like,
boring person in all of London.
yeah, we go home
go
and we
home and
study
I-
our materials
That's
and
all
we
I
go
do.
to bed.
That's all I do. I don't have time.
Morning material.
You know, and I really miss helping you.